Cleocast.
Hello and welcome back to Cleocast, the flagship podcast of Clio magazine. I'm Lawrence Robertson, and in this series I'm interviewing emerging artists of all kinds as they lead me down the creative pathways they've taken and offer a few insights for the benefit of anyone looking to make their own way in the wonderfully weird world of the arts. In this episode I chat to Evie Osbon, a multi-talented theatre maker who's been key to the development of numerous productions, variously as a writer, director and producer, in both a freelance capacity and through their company, Mind Out Theatre. Together we discuss Evie's attraction to theatre as a vehicle for driving social change, particularly by throwing light upon stories of those from misrepresented and underserved backgrounds. We explore their development journey as a theatre maker with community at the core of their ethos, first through Nottingham Playhouse's Playwright Playground programme, and then through some of Mind Out Theatre's previous productions. Think, The Ladies' Loo Chronicles and Conversations with Ed have explored a number of social issues, and their current work in progress, Them, seeks to challenge the status quo on gender norms and stereotypes through the less than rosy reality of working in a job centre. They also share some of their top tips for up-and-coming theatre makers looking to carve their own dramatic niche. Listen along to find out more. Hello, Evie. Thank you ever so much for joining me on Cleocast. We've got loads to get through and I'm really fascinated to find out more about you. Obviously, we've met a few times before, but it's really exciting to go through your career journey and all the things that you've been up to in the world of theatre. So let's get straight into it. First of all, I'm really interested to know what first sparked your interest in theatre. Is that the art form that you've always felt most drawn to?
Yeah, so I was actually pondering this myself, sort of thinking what was the moment. And actually, back when I was a kid, very, very young, so I'm one of five, I have four siblings, but there's a bit of a gap. So I kind of was an only child for like 5 or 6 years. And I have this very clear memory of my dad sat down on the couch with this massive broadsheet, one of the older newspapers that they don't really do anymore, I don't think. This big broadsheet, reading it on the couch. And I was sat next to him, the tiny, 4 or 5 year old I was. And I had the little, what's it called? The supplement, the little magazine. And I'm just sat next to him with the booklet open, the wrong way round, but just copying what he's doing. And I think that is the moment the first moment I can go back to where I think I realised I was fascinated with human behaviour and copying people and understanding what they're doing and what's going through their head. And I think from that moment I've just been fascinated in human behaviour, and I kind of think that's where it began.
That makes sense. That's a really interesting way to get bitten by the bug. Acting is a study of human nature at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the live performance element of theatre, it is the thing that I'm most excited about. It's the kind of here and now, it's the experiencing something together that drew me to theatre.
And so you set up your own theatre company, Mind Out Theatre, in 2017, if I'm right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So what was the driving force behind wanting to set up your own theatre company, and what was the process that you went through?
So there was a number of things that led up to me wanting to set up Mind Out Theatre. I was lucky enough to go to drama school. I went to ALRA, Academy of Live and Recorded Arts, which no longer exists. I went there and I learned a lot about myself as a creative and kind of was unpacking why it was I was interested in telling stories. And I think by about my second year, so degree course, I started to realise that for me it was more than just the acting I was interested in. It was the bringing stories to life, and specifically stories from people who feel misrepresented or underrepresented or underserved. And at the time, I identified as a woman, a femme person. I'd been socialised and raised as a girl, and I was very much looking around at stories and not seeing myself or 3D, exciting, dynamic depictions of women and femme experiences. So that was one of the main triggers for me wanting to set it up. And so I did, basically, with a couple of friends. It was very much, have no idea what we're doing, let's make some theatre together. And that was all the way back in 2017.
So day to day, how do you kind of operate in terms of who's involved, and how do you choose which ideas to develop into theatre projects?
I think it's fair to say that back then we were muddling through, collaborating, improvising, just figuring out kind of all the roles you needed to make a show a reality. And I think fast forward to now, I still very much work on a project-by-project basis, just because that's the reality of funding. We're not a national portfolio organisation. It's very much project-by-project, getting funding for those things one by one and in phases. But now we've gone on a big sort of journey, both myself as a freelancer and also working with more people who have more specific specialised skills in like fundraising or as a producer, etc. So I now work with Phoebe Wall-Palmer, who is a really experienced fundraiser and producer, and she was actually my mentor. So I met Phoebe, and to be honest, that was the starting point for shifting Mind Out Theatre to becoming, well, officially an incorporated community interest company, and also paying everyone equally fairly and knowing how to get those funds, because when you start out it's all a big mystery and you're just figuring it out as you go along. We got some gigs here and there, we got booked into fringe London venues, but we weren't funded at that point. It was very much profit share, friends doing things for the love of it, and slowly understanding how you can fund the kind of work we make now.
Tell me about your first production, which I think was called Think. How did that come about, and how did you develop that?
It's interesting, linking back to your previous question about what triggered setting up the theatre company. It was this show, this need to tell this story, that led to setting up Mind Out Theatre as well. Basically, in 2017, my sister, one of my sisters, was experiencing an eating disorder, and they were admitted into a mental health inpatient unit. And the year before, I'd had a partner. My partner at the time was also admitted into a mental health inpatient unit. One was in an adult unit, one was in a young person's unit. So it's fair to say that my friends and family around that time period were really opening up. Well, our worlds were being opened up to mental health in a really big way, and we were understanding how to support people we loved going through a very difficult time. It's weird because 2017 doesn't sound that long ago, but actually when I look back, I remember it feeling like a real stigma, and it feeling really like bold and brave to actually talk about mental well-being. So that was a big driver, and with my sister's permission, and I totally kind of anonymised my ex-partner's experience. It was more the introduction to the world for me, the world of an inpatient unit. I started to, think about what this story could be and could become. And so then I spoke to my friends at the time who were at drama school with me, and it seemed like people were also excited and interested to bring this like dark comedy to life. So that's where it began, really. A couple of friends in a room. It was a cast of 5 improvising moments that I was sort of excited by. And ultimately the show tracked a friendship of 2 people dealing with their own mental ill health in this inpatient unit that they had been, I believe that both characters were sectioned. For people who might not know, that's when you are legally forced, I think is the best way to describe it, to remain in an inpatient unit. It tracks their friendship, and it was kind of that alternative. It was that alternative story because it wasn't a love story. It really was a friendship of people really going through a hard time and how they get through this journey together.
Well, that is really interesting. And I think, you talk about it being, you felt it was brave to talk about mental health, but I think it does take a lot of courage to communicate your own personal experience, and something that is bound to have had such a huge impact on your life and the lives of people around you. To put that into any kind of artistic work takes a lot of courage, because it's, I guess, you have to explore it in your own head in order to communicate it. And then you've got to think about how are other people going to react to that piece as well. So it definitely sounds like quite an intense process in some respects.
Yeah, I definitely think it was. And I think with hindsight and dealing with still sensitive and intense topics as I do still in my work now, there's lots of things I've learned about how to do that more safely and better. And now I'm really sort of proud of my embedded wellbeing approach. I always work with wellbeing practitioners, and I've developed wellbeing practices and a document that we kind of follow, and a Mind Out Theatre approach. But I think it's fair to say that no one's taught me how to be a theatre maker. It's just a number of inspirational people and places that I've encountered along the way have kind of armed my toolbox.
So I know that development through improvisation is a key part of your approach with Mind Out Theatre. What do you like about this approach in particular, and what does it add to your productions?
I think it brings more truth and naturalism to performances. I think the role of a writer can be a really lonely one, and I do enjoy writing, but I also, my neurodivergent brain gets distracted and enjoys being around people more. So I know that for myself, I find it quite hard to stick on a task. And so actually, even though I had a spark of an idea that I kind of wanted to explore, it was just quite a natural instinct to want to explore it with other people first, because then quite naturally a conversation occurs. You know, you might set an improvisational task in the room and then you've already got seeds planted of what those characters say. And I think it helps to develop more authentic and different voices, because obviously if I'm just sat writing a 3-hander or a 2-hander or what have you, I've only got one brain and one voice. But if I'm hearing other people do it, already there's more variety between the characters' voices.
Absolutely. I guess it's quite exciting as well, but to kind of have that flexibility in terms of being able to tweak things as you go along, and that collaborative aspect sounds really good fun to be involved with.
Yeah, definitely. And also it helps to bring different perspectives, because everyone's got a unique set of different lived experiences, and so we'll approach different conversations, different life events very, very differently. So you're already being tested dramaturgically as a theatre maker and writer early on in the process. So I think it makes for a more rounded drafting process.
So the mission of Mind Out Theatre describes a desire to be change makers. What kind of change do you most want to make through theatre?
I think the key thing I want to say through theatre is that it's for everyone. Everyone should feel empowered to speak up and have a voice. And then that means that anyone can make any change that they would like to see. Because I suppose I've not got a specific agenda. I think the world should be this way. It's more that I hope to empower everyone to be able to make the change that they would like to see. And I think ultimately it comes back to like empathy. For me, it's kind of always going, okay, well, I might not be in that circumstance, but through theatre, through arts projects, people can get a better understanding of what it would feel like, and therefore advocate for other people, whether that's in terms of their rights. Broadly speaking, I just want to empower whoever would like to engage in the arts. Theatre is fundamentally at the forefront of political and social change, I believe.
And why do you think that? Because I was going to say, do you think theatre of different art forms has a particular ability to help bring about change? Does it have a special ability to capture the imagination of an audience as far as you're concerned?
That's a good question. I think so. And again, I think it's because of the liveness of it. You almost feel that sense of accountability when you're in a space with people there and then, because you look to your left, you look to your right, there's other people there. It's not quite the same as when you're at home or in the cinema, where it feels like more of an isolated experience. You're actually often in a room with other people, or even if it's live streamed, because you want to try and be as accessible as possible, there's still that thing of, in this very moment, other people are watching it at exactly the same time as me, and we are experiencing something together. And I think it's that core part of it that helps to trigger change, because it can bring a collective of people, again, who have different sets of lived experience, to unite together to create change, or to hold the powers that be to account.
I've certainly felt resonances of that when I've been to theatre productions, and the fact that I think, like you're saying about being in the moment, if you're watching something like a film, it's something that's recorded and put out, but you think, well, with a piece of theatre, that one experience is completely unique, and something could go wrong, or it could be acted in a slightly different way, but you've experienced something that's unique. So I've always felt more part of a theatre production in a more active way than when consuming other kinds of art.
Yeah, and I also think as I continue to develop work, I try as much as I can to kind of engage or bring on board a charity or an organisation that is doing work in relation to the themes in the play. So you've got people in the room who are then going to take the message on, or the story on, or an audience might go away with a flyer to help them talk about mental health, or that I feel like legacy is quite an important part of theatre for me as well. It's not just leaving people at the door and kind of switching off and goodbye. It's more like, and what's next? So as much as possible, I want to try and build on the experiences, and that's why I'm really passionate about like centering my work at the moment very much in the Midlands, where I'm from, to really kind of serve and work with this community first and foremost.
So what have you done with previous productions to reinforce that legacy and make sure that people go away with a particular message and that it doesn't just end when they leave the theatre?
So for Think, we partnered with Beat, which is a charity for eating disorders. And we got a whole load of pamphlets, flyers. We even got sent like T-shirts in the post. And we made sure that the actors, because we went to Edinburgh Fringe, we made sure that the actors were there to sort of say bye to the audience. It's that kind of de-rolling process. It's that kind of leaving the work in a healthy way and kind of giving out these flyers. I'm trying to think, I suppose I feel like I'm at the early stage of cultivating these more meaningful partnership relationships, if I'm honest, and I'd like to continue to develop them. There's a production I've just produced. This wasn't through Mind Out Theatre, but I was an independent producer for this, called The Kingstone by Charlotte East, directed by Hannah Stone. And it was at Nottingham Playhouse's Amplify Festival this October, and we were part of a women's rights triple bill. Again, it follows a love story, ultimately. Two people meet when they are in like primary school, they're like scouts together, and then it tracks their journey all the way through to adulthood. The man in the story, Phil, experiences mental ill health, and we thought it was really important to partner with an organisation on this. And as I say, it was very early phase. So I started to reach out and we got in touch with Wellness in Mind. So they actually came along, two representatives from Wellness in Mind, a charity, I should say, that are based near Nottingham Castle. They have a walk-in centre, which is unheard of for mental health. So anyway, they came along, two of them came along to our performance at Nottingham Playhouse, and we're still in contact with them now to try and see what we can do with them next. Workshops with young people in schools to explore how we can better talk about mental health with young people.
I'm really interested in the way that the arts can be used to make a difference in society. And that sounds like it's exactly what you're trying to do. I love the fact that your ethos emphasises a desire to amplify unheard stories and voices. And I'm hoping you can tell me a bit more about that. And I'm particularly keen to find out about the Ladies' Loo Chronicles and Conversations with Ed as two productions that you've done.
So Flora London is the writer of the Ladies' Loo Chronicles, and she'd seen Think and was excited by that story and how we brought it to life, and so was keen for me to direct and co-produce her production. The story, in terms of unheard voices in this story, I think it was really putting femme issues at the forefront. So it was very much, we were talking about periods, period poverty, misogyny, sexual harassment. It was set in a ladies' loos nightclub toilet, and one of the protagonists gets stuck in the toilet because she starts her period and she has nothing to help the period. She has no tampon, she has no pad, and the toilet attendant really takes a disliking to these couple of girls because they're very privileged, very kind of annoying and rude to her. And the toilet attendant, she has some tampons and pads she can give, but you have to pay her money for it. But they don't have any cash. They only have card. And so it sets up this trio dynamic of three women who aren't really getting along, but end up being kind of mates by the end of the story. And they all have different experiences as girls, as women. So it kind of talks about that, really. And I loved that show because it was such a load of fun. I mean, you can imagine there was loads of music, there was loads of dancing, it was kind of alcohol infused, and it was, it felt like a real party, but centering, like you were saying, centering unheard stories that aren't often discussed. And then Conversations with Ed, written by Meg Pickup. I'm trying to think I think we first met at a writers' festival. I directed a short play of Conversations with Ed. It was like the very first scratch performance that she had written. It was a spark of an idea for her. And she was so excited by what we did with it that she asked me to direct, and we performed that at the Bread and Roses Theatre in Clapham in London. And that again explored it explored a lesbian relationship and actually the impact of one of them experiencing mental ill health and how it impacted the other in the relationship.
Well, that's so two really good examples of bringing not only stories and voices that are unheard, but subjects that have, unfortunately, a lot of stigma attached to them or have done traditionally, which they shouldn't have. But it sounds as though you've been kind of doing a really good job of bringing those to the forefront. I think it's fair to say that you're a multi-talented, multidisciplined theatre maker, a writer, director, producer. Is there any one of these areas that you find especially enjoyable or feel that you're most accomplished at?
Well, thank you. That's very flattering. I don't know. That's a very hard question. I think the thing is, I'm going to not answer your question, but I'm going to kind of answer your question, I think. I love doing all the roles. And I think the thing that I always come back to is what skill set can I use to serve this particular project? So on one project, I might not be the right person to be the director because my lived experience doesn't serve that story or the lens or the vision. But I might very well be appropriate as assistant producer. For me, it's not really about what role do I think I'm best at. It's more about trying to always serve the project and the story. I love directing. I love being in a room with people. And I also love doing my producer admin tasks. I think a balance is also really nice. And I feel very lucky to have a mixture of work from home and be in a room with lots of people.
Are there any theatre makers in particular out there that you've taken inspiration from as you've developed your own practice? Which is a very unfair question probably, because I hate being asked who inspires you, but I'm interested.
There's one person that specifically springs to mind, and it's Bryony Kimmings. So she is a multifaceted theatre maker, works across theatre and now film and TV, I believe. Basically, I came across her work around 2017 when I was thinking about graduating and leaving and figuring out what I was going to do, who I wanted to be. And up to that point, I feel like I'd had a lot of tutors and a lot of people, and even my parents say to me, "You got to pick one thing. You got to target one thing." You know that phrase of a jack of all trades. You know, you're being a jack of all trades, you need to focus on one. And actually it was seeing Bryony Kimmings' career come to fruition and putting works on at the National Theatre with shows like A Pacifist Guide to a War on Cancer that made me realise, hang on a minute, she's doing it all and she's having a lot of fun by the looks of it doing it. Massively successful. We have very similar tastes. I love the humour. I love the surrealism that she brings to her work. And so I think I kept Bryony Kimmings as a bit of like inspiration of like, no, just keep following and doing what you love, and it's fine if you want to try and do different roles.
So when we first met, I think you just registered Mind Out Theatre as a community interest company. And this is kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of the arts industry, but I find it quite interesting. Why did you decide to do that, and what brought you to that point?
So I think it was a number of things again. When Mind Out Theatre was first set up in London, as I said, it was with friends. I then went on tour as an actor and kind of put Mind Out Theatre down for about a year or so between 2019 to 2020. Then the pandemic happened and it was very much like, how do I earn money? Always knowing that I wanted to see what else I could do with Mind Out Theatre and feeling like I'd still had a passion for bringing new stories to life. But I suppose it was sort of floating around, not quite knowing what to do with Mind Out Theatre next. I relocated back to my hometown of Nottingham and I started to, if I'm honest, question whether I wanted to remain in theatre throughout the pandemic. And so I started doing a number of different jobs. I worked as a support worker with care leavers who were transitioning into semi-independent living. I worked as a carer in an older people's home, and I worked in a job centre. And what was starting to pull together for me was, no, I don't want to leave the arts, but actually I want to use the arts slightly more differently to what I've been doing up to this point. And so through the community work I enjoyed doing, and I felt proud and pleased that I was able to kind of serve my community throughout the pandemic just in a different way, but actually it gave something back to me. It helped me realise that I wanted to try and more actively use the arts with communities. Through that realisation and through returning back to Nottingham, my hometown, and starting to put roots down again, really, get back in touch with Nottingham Playhouse, see what other organisations were about and doing things in good company. They really supported me early on in my journey as well. I started to kind of basically bring projects to life that involved more of the Nottingham community, Midlands community. And so it felt like a natural and right progression to register as a community interest company, because that is the work that we now do and are interested in.
So let's talk about one of your current projects, Them. I understand that you wrote the first draft of this as a member of Nottingham Playhouse's Playwright Playground. First, can you tell me a bit more about that and how it helped your writing process?
Let's see. So I think it's fair to say that I didn't consider myself to be a writer, even though I'd written, because as we were saying and exploring, much of my work came from improvisation. So I wouldn't say I just was a sit-alone writer. But I was starting to gather a few pieces that I was kind of proud of. I had like a poem, I had like a couple of short monologues that I developed, and some scenes, probably from Think, that I submitted to Nottingham Playhouse for this Playwright Playground group. And I got in. I was quite shocked and pleased. Craig Gilbert, who is now no longer there, led this group, and Craig's an incredible dramaturg, so he's incredible at unpacking story structure and kind of getting to the core of what the story's about. And so it helped me it held me accountable, on all honesty. It held me accountable. I had to meet, I think it was once every 2 weeks we met, and we had like some homework as well, and it was just a really fun process along with other Midlands-based writers to kind of explore an idea. And so that was where I started to think how exciting it would be to begin to write a story based on my experience of working in a job centre and my gender journey of realising I am non-binary. Because I think the exciting thing for me was the complete polar opposite experience of living outside of the gender binary and the job centre, which is a very tick box and oppressive space that characterises and values people based on their protected characteristics. So I really enjoyed that process of beginning to write the play.
I know from personal experience that you need that push sometimes, don't you, to keep you going and keep you disciplined, because it's very easy to, I've often found myself thinking, oh, that would be a good thing to do, that would be a good thing to write, that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh, now I've got to go and do it. So having that group to push you forward is probably quite useful.
Yeah, exactly, definitely. And it turned out, actually, one of the people in the writers group also worked in a job centre at one point, because he, along with the rest of the group, read the play, and then we did like a feedback session. We did it with everyone's plays. And he was like, did you actually work in a job centre, Evie? Because it's very, very true to my experience. And I was like, oh, that's the best compliment you could give me. And I think from that point, I was like, okay, this is a story that it sounds like people are interested in hearing, so let's try and continue to develop it.
And then from that point, I know that it's been through quite extensive research and development processes, and I had the pleasure of attending a preview of it. How have you found that research and development process as a means of developing the production?
So it was the first project that we did registered as Mind Out Arts CIC, and we wanted to set off on the right foot. So it was partly about exploring the play and the world, but it was equally about working with the community to have an enjoyable first experience of working with Mind Out Theatre. It was working with 10 local queer artists across the Midlands. Most of them were from Nottingham, but we had some people from Derby and Leicester. And it was a place to non-hierarchically explore what this show could be. Basically what that means is, in the room, we made sure that the early career artists, maybe some of the people who we had on board, had never been a part of a rehearsal room, but were just interested in theatre. That qualifies you to be in the room, in my opinion. If you have an interest, you're allowed to be there. And worked alongside professional actors, valuing lived queer experience and theatre making experience equally, to see what can come out of it. And it was just beautiful. It was really inspiring process. Like, everyone has a story to tell, and so I think that's something that I'm really passionate about, is honouring and enjoying the process as much as the outcome. Often in theatre, things are so fast-paced. People have tight deadlines and the funding needs to be spent or the funding's not coming in time, what have you. And it drives this kind of very fast working process, and actually to just really enjoy it for what it is and not have pressure to have to deliver this shiny thing at the end was really lovely.
And what a fantastic organic way to develop an idea and build a story with all those different inputs. I imagine that has a really positive effect on the overall quality in the end, and the representational quality of it as well, in terms of all those different people who feed into it with all their different experiences. Some of the best ideas come out of things that are a bit spontaneous and a bit unpredictable.
It's really counterintuitive. It's this weird thing where as soon as you take the pressure off, I often find that the best ideas come.
The working title of them was Purder, and I know you made quite a conscious decision to change that, and I was just wondering what motivated the change of title.
Well, first of all, I will say I did all this research back in March. So if people are interested in finding out more about the etymology of the word purder, I've actually written a blog, which is on Mind Out Theatre's website, that it's titled What Does Purder Mean? But I can give a abridged explanation. I was first introduced to the word purder when I was in my job centre training as a civil servant. And what it was introduced to me to mean was the period of time on the run-up to an election, whether that be local or general. And what it meant was that the civil service or the job centre staff had to be even more conscious of how unbiased to be around any kind of political opinions or decisions with the general public coming into the space. And I felt the word, when I first heard it, it did feel like quite an oppressive thing, really, to feel like this removal of opinion. So it intrigued me as a word and as a concept. So originally we ran with that as a title for the play, this kind of feeling of oppression and removal of opinion. But then as I had more time, more Arts Council funding, more time to really delve into what that word meant, it became apparent that purder, actually, it's derived from a Hindustani word, parda, and it literally translates to curtain or veil. Then, from realising that, I then came across the purder practice, which is prevalent among some Muslim and Hindu communities. And it's a practice whereby women and men are segregated, and also women cover their bodies to conceal their skin and their form. I was reading more and more about the practice, the religious practice, and kind of, I suppose, the more modern interpretation of what that practice may now represent to women, especially across the South Asian community, I should say. We realised that to some people it's quite an offensive term, and then to a lot of people it's a word they just don't know. So it's kind of meaningless. And so as we unpacked all of this, we sort of realised it didn't fit the play anymore. So them ? Felt like a better title, because not only is it a play on like they them pronouns, someone realising they're non-binary, but also this divide of who is to blame, them or us, kind of reminiscent of that.
But I find it really interesting to hear that thought process described, because I think it shows, your sensitivity to all the different possible interpretations of a particular word and how it means different things in different cultures, and also just the level of attention to detail in terms of working out, okay, what exactly does this word mean and is it appropriate for the production? So it's a real high degree of consideration that obviously goes into your work.
I think ultimately I don't want to offend people, especially people who have been historically marginalised and, well, belittled or underserved, or so it's not appropriate, it's not right.
So how do you think them ties into topical conversations about gender and other social issues?
Well, it's quite a hostile environment, I think it's fair to say, for a lot of trans people to even just get by, just feel like, seen, loved. There's such a lot of unnecessary discourse at the minute around pronouns and all sorts. I mean, to be honest, I try and switch off from it because I have no time for people who don't want to be accepting. Although having said that, this play is kind of for those people. It's for the people who are well-intentioned and are kind at heart, but perhaps haven't been given all the information in order to understand people. It's a hard one to put my finger on because, as I say, I try and distance myself to a degree from some of the horrible things that we see in the news around gender. And so I think that is what the play is about. It's about having enough of the status quo and saying, okay, well, what can we do differently? Maybe the thing we need to do differently is to unite together. And it doesn't matter if you aren't trans or if you aren't non-binary, but if you feel like you have been persecuted or undermined or marginalised, then please try and see how other people are being marginalised too and come together to fight the powers that be.
And what's next for that production what's next for them as a show?
So I think we want to write some songs. It feels like a play with pop punk music. So we're gonna get a composer on board. We're going to work with hopefully an audio description consultant to see if we can integrate audio description into the world of the play. And we're gonna hopefully be doing this next year, funding dependent. We're gonna hopefully be doing that and starting to work more with disabled queer communities and working class queer communities. So actually really looking at the intersectionality of the queer people that we're working with and making sure that it feels like a variety of lived experiences of the job centre space.
Fantastic. Well, I'm interested to see what happens next, and I'll be keen to follow along as it continues to progress. I think it sounds like a really good next step. So as exciting as it can be to build and maintain an enterprise like a theatre company and to put on a production, it can also be intense and stressful, I would imagine. And I know that you've got ideals that inspire you and make you want to produce theatre, but on a day-to-day basis, when it's cold and wet and dark and you're feeling a bit miserable, have you got something that keeps you going and keeps you motivated to carry on making things happen?
Yes, and it's very cringe. I just want to make the world a better place. That is what gets me up in the morning, and I think that is why I enjoy doing lots of different things, because I always come back round to the why of why I'm doing things. If I don't feel like it's actually helping anyone, then it's not a project for me. That's what gets me up in the morning. And sometimes it doesn't. Do you know, that's actually something I've had to accept as well. I've gone on my own journey with both my gender and my mental health, and now I'm a proudly citalopram taking person who has anxiety and depression, and that's also totally fine. I don't like toxic positivity and kind of being like, get on with it. I'm not saying that's how I feel, and I'm not saying that's what happens to me every morning. But if on a good day, if I get out of bed and I just remind myself that hopefully what I'm doing is going to help one person, then that's what keeps me going.
That's ideal, I think, really. And that's all that you need sometimes. If you think that you've made that little bit of difference, that's enough sometimes, isn't it? So you've recently taken on a new role as a member of the producing team at Belgrade Theatre in Coventry. Congratulations, first of all. What does this role involve?
I have to be honest and say I've only done 3 weeks of the job. I'm currently on jury service and it's been extended. So I have kind of a bit of an understanding of my new role, but obviously much to their chagrin as much as mine, I've not been there that long to figure out what my role is. But ultimately it is what it says on the tin. The Belgrade Theatre in Coventry want to become even more of a hub for their local community and champion stories from the community. Not only serve the community by telling their stories, but tell the stories with them is a huge thing that they've been doing for a while, but they want to ramp up and do more of. So a lot of my work will be with refugees and asylum seekers. There's a big refugee and asylum seeker population in Coventry. It will also be a lot of work with over 50s, people who are over 50, especially thinking about older people who are perhaps more vulnerable, who may already be coming to the theatre for a warm space and a hot drink, but actually, you know, are we offering enough? So are we offering them enough to welcome them? You know, maybe it's about us setting up a drop-in drama group or what have you. I'm very much in the early phases of figuring out what people of Coventry would like to see from the Belgrade and then going from there. But there's lots of exciting things underway.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of opportunities to explore the different ways that theatre can affect people positively. So that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold. I think I've realised for a theatre space that actually has a venue and has core funding from the Arts Council, I do think they have a but we have a public or civic responsibility to be a space for people to go to feel safe, and to, as I say, just sit down and be social and chat with people and build confidence. So it's that which I see as just as integral as developing artistic skills. I think it's both. It's making sure that we can be a space for both people who want to come along and be social, but also people who want to develop their skills.
And I suppose the two go hand in hand in that a lot of creativity, especially creativity in theatre, involves being social and collaborating and working with other people. So the combination of the two sounds really nice. So in terms of you and your journey going forward, and particularly with Mind Out Theatre, what's on your horizons, both in the kind of short to medium term and the long term? Have you got ideas on things that you'd want to work on next, or are you following your nose a bit?
A little bit of both, to be honest, because I work as both a freelancer, self-employed, and my 3 days with the Belgrade employed. It's sort of a bit, I'm finding my new balance really of how much I'll be working on Mind Out Theatre projects. But I think it's fair to say that I'd like to move us in a direction where we can share decision making with a wider variety of people. Whether that's a board or a panel, I'd like to see that happen hopefully in the next 2 years maybe. I'd like to secure an over 30k bid from the Arts Council and sort of scale our work a bit more so that we're touring some shows to both community venues regionally, but also theatre venues regionally. Kind of securing a couple of night shows, maybe even like week runs in venues, and scaling the work up that way is exciting to me. I also want to develop some paid placement programs. I think there's a lot of well-meaning arts organisations who are offering lots of free programs to people. But what we've got to remember is people have to pay the bills. And I'm just wondering, a barrier I do think for people getting involved is the lack of pay. And it's hard because funding is always going to be difficult, especially in the arts. But I'd like to try and develop more of a paid placement program for people who don't necessarily think or know that they can be a creative or an artist yet.
Well, watch this space then. It sounds as though that's plenty to be getting on with. I wish you all the best of luck with it. Just as a final question, what advice would you most like to impart to any aspiring theatre makers that may wish to follow in your footsteps?
I would say, ultimately, try and follow what brings you joy. And remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Because I have found the more I paused and had chances to reflect, not only did I understand myself more and start living more authentically as myself, kind of coming out as non-binary and being more me, helped to attract the people who I wanted to work with. And it was only through pausing and giving myself space that I was able to do that. And obviously money is a big thing, but I'd also say, like, there's no shame in earning your money. Earn your money however you can and in whatever way you'll be able to do for your mental well-being. But earn your money and stay creative. And don't feel ashamed if you're earning your money isn't through a creative job, because that is the reality. It shouldn't be the case, but that is the reality of starting out as a theatre maker. And I'd just say slowly, you begin to realise that you're doing more and more of what you wanted to do all along. And with that in mind, I would say, like, try a lot of different creative roles, because that is what has actually ultimately led me to be able to be a full-time creative person. I am a facilitator, I am a producer, I am a theatre maker. You know, I do many different jobs, and that is why I am now working full-time in the arts. It's not because I'm fully full-time a producer, fully full-time a director. And other people may have different ways of doing it, but I would just say be open to trying new things and follow the joy.
Thank you ever so much for joining me, Evie. It's been a real pleasure to have you on Cliocast. If people want to find out more about you and about Mind Out Theatre, where can they look?
So Mind Out Theatre's website is www.mindOuttheatre.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Evie Osbon, Evie Osbon. I post on there about upcoming opportunities and generally finding other creatives to collaborate with.
There you are, you heard it here. Go and have a look. And once again, Evie, thank you so much for joining me on ClioCast. That was my conversation with Evie Osbon. Don't forget, if you'd like to find out more about Evie and Mind Out Theatre, you can check out mindouttheatre.com, or you can look Evie up on X, the social network formerly known as Twitter. As ever, neither ClioCast nor Clio Magazine as a whole are sponsored in any way by any organisation or individual mentioned unless specifically stated. If you're enjoying ClioCast, don't forget to subscribe, that way you'll never miss another episode. And if your friends are interested in art and creativity, why not share it with them as well? You can also support us by leaving a review, as that really does help us to get the word out and allow others to find us. If you'd like to find out more about Clio Magazine, head on over to cliomagazine.com, where you can learn all about the project as a whole and discover a range of new content published on a regular basis. You can also follow us on Instagram, X and Threads at Clio Magazine to stay up to date with all the latest developments and more. Like, follow, share, let us know what you think. Clio Magazine is a brand new platform and your support means everything. I've been Lawrence Robertson, and until next time, thank you for listening to ClioCast.